Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you believed nothing could shake the foundation of your relationship, only to discover that in the end they still longed for someone from their past? What would you do if the person you were ready to marry chose their ex over you? This is the story of David and Elizabeth, a love that seemed unbreakable until the ghost of the past returned in the form of James, the ex boyfriend Elizabeth could never fully let go of. David was 30, a man who had worked tirelessly to build a stable and meaningful life. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't reckless, he was steady, reliable, and deeply loyal. His friends often teased him about being old fashioned, but David wore that as a badge of honor. He believed in love that lasted, promises that were sacred, and loyalty that never wavered. Elizabeth was 28, radiant and full of life. She had an energy that could light up any room she walked into, the kind of person who made strangers feel like friends within minutes. Where David was thoughtful and measured, Elizabeth was spontaneous and free spirited. On paper, they were opposites, but in reality, they balanced each other perfectly. Their story began 3 years earlier, at a friend's wedding. Elizabeth was the maid of honor, David the best man. Their first dance together was filled with laughter, awkward missteps, and a spark that neither of them could deny. By the end of the night, David knew he had found someone extraordinary. Elizabeth, though cautious, found herself drawn to his calm presence, the kind of stability she had long craved but never admitted out loud. Over time, their bond deepened. David became Elizabeth's anchor, the person she leaned on when her job stressed her out or when she doubted herself. Elizabeth, in turn, brought joy and adventure into David's structured world. Together, they created a rhythm that felt like home. After 2 years of dating, David proposed on a quiet evening by the lake where they had shared their first trip together. He knelt with a ring that wasn't extravagant but chosen with care, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, because he remembered Elizabeth once saying she loved stones with stories. Tears filled Elizabeth's eyes as she whispered yes, and in that moment, David felt like the luckiest man alive. They began planning a future together, a home, children, a life built on trust and commitment. Everything seemed perfect. But love stories are rarely without complications. For Elizabeth, there was one lingering shadow: James. James had been her college boyfriend, the one who taught her what it felt like to fall recklessly in love. Their relationship had been intense, passionate, chaotic, filled with highs and lows that Elizabeth exhilarated but drained. It ended badly, with James walking away after yet another argument. Elizabeth had sworn she was done with him, that she wanted something more stable. And then she met David. David gave her the security James never could, but deep inside, there was a part of her heart that had never fully closed the doors on James. At first, it didn't matter. She was happy, truly happy, with David. But life has a way of reopening old wounds, and soon Elizabeth would be forced to confront the pull of the past and make a choice that would shatter everything. It all started innocently enough, or at least that's how Elizabeth explained it to herself. One ordinary afternoon, She received a friend request on social media. The name made her heart skip. James Carter. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the notification. Years had passed since they had spoken. The last time she had seen him was at a coffee shop, an awkward encounter where neither of them knew what to say. He had been her first great love, and the breakup had left her bruised. And yet, here he was, sending her a request as if no time had passed. Elizabeth knew she shouldn't, but her finger clicked accept. At first, it was small talk. Hey, it's been a long time. Yeah, it really has. How are you? But small talk has a way of digging deeper. Soon they were reminiscing about college, about old friends, about the trips they had taken together. James apologized for the way things had ended, admitting he had been immature, too quick to walk away. Elizabeth told herself she was only being polite, that these conversations meant nothing. After all, she was engaged to David, the man who had given her stability and unconditional love. But still, her heart raced every time she saw James' name light up on her phone. David noticed subtle changes almost immediately. Elizabeth started guarding her phone more closely, flipping its screen down when they had dinner together. She laughed at random moments, smiling at texts she didn't share. When David asked everything okay, she brushed it off with a casual, yeah, just a friend from work, or it's nothing important. But David's instincts told him otherwise. One Friday evening, Elizabeth told David she was meeting her girlfriends for dinner. He didn't question it, he trusted her. But when he happened to see a mutual friend a few days later, she casually mentioned she hadn't been there that night. David didn't confront Elizabeth immediately. Instead, he sat in silence that night, watching her move around the kitchen, laughing as she talked about work. His chest ached with unease, but he told himself he might be overthinking. Elizabeth loved him. She had yes to forever. That had to mean something. Meanwhile, Elizabeth found herself caught between two worlds. With David, where she had safety, devotion, and a future she could depend on, and with James, where she felt a spark she hadn't experienced in years, the kind of reckless passion that reminded her of being younger and carefree. Later at night, lying beside David, she scrolled through her old photos of her and James, the adventures, the smiles, the way he used to hold her like he never wanted to let go. It was dangerous nostalgia, but she didn't stop. David could feel the distance growing. Though Elizabeth never admitted anything, she became distracted, spending more weekends with friends or busy with errands. Their wedding planning slowed, with Elizabeth pushing off decisions. Every time David tried to bring it up, she reassured him with a quick kiss or half hearted promise. But in his gut, he knew something was unraveling. What he didn't know was just how Elizabeth was to making a choice that would break him completely. Elizabeth told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. After all, she and James were only talking, catching up, sharing memories, venting about life. But as weeks passed, their conversations stretched longer. What started as quick exchanges turned into late night messages that bled past midnight. Sometimes they were harmless, funny anecdotes. Other times, They carried a weight Elizabeth couldn't deny. Do you ever miss the way things used to be? James wrote one night. Elizabeth hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. But then she typed back. Sometimes life was different then. That single word, sometimes, was all it took to open the floodgates. Meanwhile, David felt the distance growing. Elizabeth still smiled at him, still hugged him, still wore the sapphire ring he had given her, but something had changed. The warmth in her eyes when she looked at him had dulled, replaced by a distracted air that cut him deeply. Dinner conversations turned one sided. Elizabeth often seemed miles away, nodding absently as David talked about his day. When he asked what was on her mind, she would shrug, just tired. But David knew it wasn't just exhaustion, it was disconnection. Wedding planning became an uphill battle. David tried to set dates for tastings, fittings, and venue visits, but Elizabeth always had excuses: too busy, too tired, or not in the mood. One Saturday morning, David surprised her with tickets to a concert by one of her favorite bands. She smiled politely, thanked him, but then said, "Oh, I can't. I already promised to meet the girls that night." David forced a smile, hiding his disappointment. But later, when he checked her social media, there were no photos of girls' night. Instead, there was a subtle check in from a cafe across town, the same neighborhood where James lived. The moment hurt David more than he expected. It wasn't about the concert, it was about the trust, about the feeling that the woman he loved was slipping through his fingers, and no matter how tightly he held on, she was already reaching for someone else. That night, David lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Elizabeth's steady breathing beside him. His heart felt heavy, like he was sharing his bed with a stranger. And yet, Elizabeth wasn't entirely free from guilt. She felt a dawn at her when David kissed her forehead, when he sent her sweet texts during the day, when he looked at her like she was his whole world. James was passion, fire, nostalgia, but David was safety, loyalty, a promise she had already accepted. Part of her longed to pull away from James and refocus on David, but every time she tried, James would say something, something small, something loaded, that drew her right back in. "I still think about you sometimes. You were the one I never got over. I can't believe I let you go." And slowly, Elizabeth's heart leaned further and further towards the past. David wasn't blind. He noticed the late night phone glows, the way Elizabeth smiled more at her screen than she had at him in weeks, the excuses piling up. One evening, he finally asked, "Elizabeth, are you sure you still want this? Our wedding? Our future?" She froze, her heart hammering, but forced a smile. "Of course, David. Why would you even ask that?" But her words didn't reach her eyes, and David, though silent, felt the truth pressing in. The divide between them was no longer subtle, it was chasm, and he knew it was only a matter of time before it swallowed their relationship whole. It was a Thursday evening when Elizabeth received a message from James that stopped her heart. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we gave us another chance? She stared at her phone for what felt like an eternity. Her pulse quickened, her palms grew sweaty, and though she typed, erased, and retyped responses, one thing became clear. James wasn't reminiscing anymore. He was offering her something, a possibility, a temptation, and she didn't shut it down. Instead, she wrote back, "Sometimes I do wonder." With that one message, an invisible line had been crossed. Meanwhile, David was doing everything he could to hold them together. He arranged for a romantic dinner at a rooftop restaurant, trying to recapture the spark. He even booked a weekend getaway, hoping a change of scenery might remind Elizabeth why she had chosen each other in the first place. Elizabeth agreed, but her enthusiasm was muted. She dressed up, smiled politely, and held David's hands across the table, but her eyes were distant, as if her heart was somewhere else entirely. David tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself he was imagining things, but deep down, he knew. It wasn't long before Elizabeth gave in fully. One afternoon, under the excuse of visiting a friend, she met James at a quiet cafe. The moment she saw him, memories rushed back. His smirk, his confidence, the way he always seemed to know exactly what to say to make her feel alive. They talked, laughed, reminisced, and when James reached across the table, brushing his fingers against hers, Elizabeth didn't pull away. That night, she returned home to David, who was waiting with takeout and a movie. He greeted her with a kiss, and though she kissed him back, in her mind, she was still at the cafe, replaying the way James' touch had lingered. One lie turned into two, two turned into many. Elizabeth told David she was working late, meeting friends, running errands. Each excuse gave her more time to slip away, more moments to indulge in the dangerous comfort of James's presence. David noticed. He noticed the scent of unfamiliar cologne when she came home, the way her phone was suddenly logged with a passcode, the nervous laughter when he casually asked about her day. But David wasn't ready to accuse her, not yet. He clung to hope, to denial, to the belief that maybe, just maybe, she was still his Elizabeth. Elizabeth told herself she wasn't being reckless, just exploring old emotions, seeking closure, finding herself. But with every meeting, every secret, she was sliding further into betrayal. One night, James leaned in closer than ever before, his voice a whisper, his hand brushing against hers again. "Liz, you know you're not happy with him, not like you were with me." Her breath caught in her throat, because a part of her, the part she didn't want to admit, knew he was right. Back home, David sat at his desk, staring at the wedding invitations he had just picked up. The elegant gold lettering spelled out their names: David and Elizabeth, together, forever. But as he ran his fingers over the embossed letters, a sharp, Gut wrenching thought consumed him. What if forever wasn't meant to be? It was a Friday afternoon when Elizabeth told David she was heading out of town with a few girlfriends. She kissed him on the cheek, packed a small overnight bag, and left with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. David waved goodbye, forcing himself to believe her, but the nagging feeling in his chest told him otherwise. Because David had noticed something, the way her phone buzzed at odd hours, the way she suddenly guarded it, even taking it to the bathroom with her, the way she seemed happier walking out the door than coming back in. Elizabeth wasn't with girlfriends, she was with James. They checked into a quiet boutique hotel under his name. For Elizabeth, it felt thrilling, dangerous, yet intoxicating. She told herself it was just one night, just one weekend, just closure. But as James poured her a glass of wine and pulled her into his arms, Elizabeth knew this was more than a closure. This was her heart choosing chaos over stability. Back home, David sat alone on the couch. He had ordered takeout for one. He had poured himself a drink, and as the hours dragged by, he stared at the empty side of the bed. Something inside him broke that night. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her, but his gut screamed the truth that the woman he loved was slipping away, and no amount of loyalty or effort could hold her in place if she didn't want to be there. David texted her once, "Hope you are having fun. Miss you." No reply. Hours passed. He sent another, "Good night, Liz. Love you." Still nothing. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's phone sat face down on the nightstand in that hotel room, ignored and forgotten, while James whispered promises in her ear. The next morning, Elizabeth returned. Her hair still smelled faintly of James' cologne. She rehearsed her excuse in her mind, how exhausting the girls' trip had been, how much she needed a shower and some rest. David greeted her at the door with coffee and a smile, though his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. "You look tired," he said softly. "Yeah, long night," she replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. He wanted to believe her. He chose to believe her. But deep down, the seed of doubt had already taken root. Elizabeth convinced herself it wasn't really betrayal. At least, not yet. "It's not like I have moved on. David is still my fiancé. James is just a reminder of who I used to be." But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. Because when James touched her, she didn't think of David at all. Later that night, David stood in the bathroom, staring at himself in the mirror. He whispered quietly, almost to convince himself, "She wouldn't do that to me. She loves me. We are getting married." But the hollow ache in his chest said otherwise. The following week, David noticed subtle changes in Elizabeth. She laughed less at his jokes. She spent more time scrolling on her phone than talking to him. She avoided intimacy with carefully chosen excuses. To anyone else, they might have seemed like normal relationship hiccups, but David knew better. Something had shifted, and it terrified him. One evening, while they sat together on the couch, David glanced at Elizabeth's hand. The engagement ring he had chosen so carefully, the one he had saved for months to buy, gleamed on her finger. But instead of admiration, David saw discomfort in her eyes. She twisted it, sliding it up and down her finger as though testing how easily it could come off. That simple gesture stabbed his heart. Elizabeth told herself she was still committed. She told herself she loved David. After all, he had always been dependable, steady, and kind. But whenever James messaged her late at night, her heart raced in ways it never did for David anymore. Her guilt dawned at her, but she justified it. David doesn't need to know. I'm not leaving him. Not yet. I just need time to figure out what I want. But in truth, she already knew. Sensing the growing gap, David tried harder. He planned date nights. He cooked her favorite meals. He even suggested they take a short trip together to rekindle their bond. Just the two of us, he said hopefully. Elizabeth forced a smile. Maybe, we'll see. But her phone burst, and her eyes flickered down at the screen. David noticed. She turned it over quickly, face down. That single action spoke louder than words. One night, the cracks broke into a fight. David asked gently, why don't you ever tell me where you're going anymore? I just want to know you are safe. Elizabeth snapped back. Why do you always have to control me? Can I not have friends? Can I not have a life outside of you? David flinched. That's not what I meant. I just I just want to feel included. I don't want to lose you. Her silence was sharper than shouting. Later that night, David reached for her hand under the covers. She shifted away. His chest ached as he stared at the ceiling in the darkness, realizing that he was already losing her, piece by piece. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's rendezvous with James became more frequent. A coffee after work, a quick drink on a Friday, another overnight stay, this time disguised as a work retreat. With every encounter, she drifted further from David and deeper into the arms of the man who represented passion, danger, and recklessness. David, devoted and desperate, had no idea he was clinging to a woman already halfway gone. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Elizabeth had gone to shower after dinner, leaving her phone carelessly on the kitchen counter. Normally, David respected her privacy. He had never felt the urge to snoop, but tonight, a notification lit up the screen. A name he didn't recognize. James. The preview read, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. David's stomach dropped. His hands trembled as he stared at the glowing screen. His heart pounded so loudly he thought Elizabeth might hear it from the bathroom. He didn't open the phone. He didn't need to. The words burned into his brain. When Elizabeth returned, wrapped in her towel, she noticed the look on his face. What's wrong? She asked casually, pretending not to notice her phone had shifted slightly. David forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed him. Nothing. But inside, his world was collapsing. That night, David lay awake, his body turned away from her. The phone buzzed once more on her nightstand. She grabbed it quickly, typing back under the covers. David clenched his jaw. His heart screamed to confront her, but fear chained him down. Fear of the truth, fear of losing her. The next morning, David couldn't hold it in anymore. Who's James? He asked softly over breakfast. Elizabeth froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Then she laughed nervously. He's just a friend. From work. Why? David studied her face. He wanted to believe her, desperately. Because the way you talk to him, it doesn't feel like it's just friends. Her eyes hardened. Are you checking my phone now? Do you not trust me? The blame shift hit him like a slap. Elizabeth leaned into the role of the wounded partner. You're suffocating me, David. You want to control everything I do. I can't even have male friends without you acting jealous. David's voice cracked. I don't care about you having friends. I care about losing you. But Elizabeth only shook her head, dismissing him. You're overreacting. After she stormed out, David sat alone at the table, staring at the untouched breakfast. He felt foolish, powerless. He knew something was wrong, yet she made him question his sanity. Was he really overreacting? Or was he watching his fiancée slip through his fingers into someone else's arms? Days later, David's doubts crystallized into certainty. Elizabeth's scarf, the one he had gifted her last winter, carried a faint scent that wasn't hers, a man's cologne. And then there was the hotel receipt tucked into her purse, dated the night she claimed she was working late. David's hands shook as he held it. He could no longer deny the truth. The cracks in their engagement were not just cracks, they were fractures beyond repair. David carried the truth like a heavy stone in his chest. He went to work, smiled politely to colleagues, and tried to bury his suspicions under a facade of normalcy. But every time Elizabeth left the house with her phone clutched tightly in her hand, his stomach twisted with dread. Every night, he lay beside her, watching her drift into a peaceful sleep while his mind raced with questions. Why him? Why not me? Am I not enough? The silence between them grew unbearable. Their 2 year anniversary was supposed to be a celebration. David had reserved a table at her favorite restaurant, even ordered the wine she loved. He dressed in his best suit, nervously adjusting his tie as he waited for her to come. Hours passed. The food turned cold. The candles burned down to nubs. Finally, Elizabeth stumbled in before midnight, smelling faintly of alcohol and cologne that wasn't her own. David didn't need to ask where she had been. His heart already knew. Where were you? His voice was low, steady, but his eyes betrayed the storm raging inside. Elizabeth dropped her purse on the counter. Out with friends. Don't start, David. I'm too tired for this. Don't lie to me. His voice cracked. I know about James. I know you have been seeing him. Just tell me the truth. Her silence confirmed everything. Finally, she snapped. Fine, yes, I've been seeing him, but only because you have smothered me, David. You never let me breathe. With James, I feel alive. With you, I feel trapped. The word sliced through him like a blade. He staggered back as though she had physically struck him. You are engaged to me, he whispered. You wear my ring, and you are saying this to my face? Elizabeth crossed her arms, defiant. Maybe I shouldn't have said yes in the first place. The room spun. Every memory, every promise, every dream they had shared together came crashing down in an instant. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had trusted with his future, was gone. All that remained was betrayal. I gave you everything, David said, his voice trembling. My love, my trust, my future, and you threw it away for him. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. I can't do this anymore, Elizabeth. I can't keep fighting for someone who doesn't want to be fought for. Her face softened, but only for a moment. Then she looked away. David walked into the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, and pulled out the small velvet box that had once held her engagement ring. She wasn't wearing it anymore. She had stopped days ago. He placed the box on the kitchen counter. This was supposed to mean forever, but forever doesn't exist for us. Without waiting for a response, he walked out into the night, leaving Elizabeth alone in the silence she had created. David returned to his empty apartment that night, the streets dimly lit by flickering lamps. For the first time in years, he felt the cold weight of solitude, not just as a temporary feeling, but as a permanent state he had chosen for himself. The apartment smelled faintly of Elizabeth's perfume, a ghost of the life they had once shared. He ran his fingers over the couch where she had sat, over the coffee table where they had planned trips and anniversaries. Every corner reminded him of what he had lost. The next day, David confided in his closest friends. She chose him over me, he said, the words hollow yet sharp. I can't even hate her. I just feel empty. His friends were silent, understanding without judgment. You did the right thing, one said finally. You can't force someone to love you or honor the life you wanted together. That's on her, not you. David nodded, but the ache remained. Meanwhile, Elizabeth tried to reach out, to justify her actions, to salvage what she could have of their broken engagement. She sent messages, emails, even attempted calls. But David didn't respond. He blocked her numbers and accounts one by one. Elizabeth sat alone in her apartment, finally forced to confront the consequences of her choices. James had been thrilling, intoxicating, but fleeting. And the man she had truly loved, the one who had built a life around her, had walked away. For the first time, she understood the depth of her loss. But it was too late. David spent weeks in introspection. He didn't blame Elizabeth entirely. She was human, flawed, capable of poor choices. But he also knew he had a responsibility to himself to protect his heart from being trampled again. He journaled, he exercised, he poured his energy into work and friends. Slowly, he began to heal, but the memory of what had been taken from him lingered, a quiet ache that would never fully vanish. 8 months later, Elizabeth attempted one final contact, reaching him from a new account. "I am sorry," she wrote. "I never meant to hurt you. I made mistakes." David read the message once. He could feel his old emotions stirring, the memories of laughter and love, but also the sharp sting of betrayal. He typed a single response: "Acknowledged. Do not contact me again." And with that, he closed the account. David realized that love is not just about passion, it is about respect, loyalty, and shared values. No amount of longing or nostalgia could replace the foundation of trust that had been broken. Elizabeth's choice had taught him that sometimes walking away is the only way to preserve your dignity, your heart, and your future. The story of David and Elizabeth is a raw reminder that love alone is never enough to sustain a relationship. Passion, nostalgia, or fleeting excitement can tempt even the most devoted partner, but without trust, respect, and accountability, a bond, even an engagement, can crumble. David's journey shows the courage it takes to acknowledge betrayal, to confront the painful truth, and ultimately to walk away from someone you love when they consistently refuse to honor the foundations of your relationship. It is a lesson in emotional self respect, boundaries, and the realization that one cannot force commitment from another. Elizabeth's choices highlight the dangers of emotional avoidance and self indulgence in relationships. While the thrill of reconnecting with a past love might feel invigorating, it can destroy lives when it comes at the cost of someone else's heart and trust. Common person perspective. From a common person's point of view, many of us can relate to David's pain, who hasn't felt blindsided by someone they trusted, someone who seemed devoted, only to discover hidden choices that betray the trust. People watching or listening to this story might reflect: would I have noticed the subtle signs sooner? Would I have confronted the truth earlier? David's restraint and emotional vulnerability make him relatable. His love was genuine, yet he allowed himself to be hurt because he respected and trusted Elizabeth. Elizabeth's behavior is also a cautionary tale. Many of us have friends or acquaintances who flirt with nostalgia or temptation, ignoring the sanctity of their commitments. Her eventual regret serves as a stark warning. Actions have consequences, and some doors, once closed by the betrayed, cannot be reopened. Ultimately, this story is about choices and consequences. It is about realizing that respect and loyalty are non negotiable in a healthy relationship. It is about understanding that walking away from someone who repeatedly disregards your emotional needs is not weakness, it is self preservation, dignity, and courage. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories exploring the depths of love, betrayal, and human emotion. Pause for a moment and reflect. How would you respond if faced with a similar choice?